goal of the survey is to understand how people are feeling about their current work, because, from my perspective as somebody who does recruiting and staffing every day, I always tell people it is so much less expensive to retain your staff than to hire somebody new. You might have heard this stat before, but when you have a position either unfilled in your lab or you need to rehire in your lab, it is anywhere from 3 to 8 times more expensive to do that than, again, to implement some simple measures to make sure that your lab is retaining staff and actively working towards being a place that provides high levels of job satisfaction to not just your bench level techs and admins, but even your managers and supervisors. So want to talk about a few of those tips right now. And again, this is partially based on survey results, but this is also partially based on our 20 years of experience in helping labs to understand these questions. But for improving frontline retention, the biggest thing for me is this idea of whatever you permit in your lab, you promote. What that basically means is if you allow staff to cut corners, if you don't address personality conflicts or other types of conflicts in your lab, if you allow those things to fester, it is going to drive away your best staff, and it is going to retain those staff members who might be responsible for some of that corner cutting. The culture of the lab is what you ultimately decide to make it. There is no lab. There's lab equipment, there's samples, but there is no lab in the absence of organizational culture and management. And so I really want to encourage those of you on the call who are managers, or those of you who are even directors or administration, to really work with your frontline managers, with your supervisors, with your team leads to make sure that you are doing really 3 things. And that is looking for opportunities for continuous improvement, whether that's providing CE credits or stipends for folks that take care of that stuff, to make sure that you are always emphasizing safe conditions. And I don't just mean safe from the standpoint of what CLIA requires for a safe laboratory environment, but really safe in the sense that, that you're taking care of the kinds of interpersonal conflicts that we see reported. There was an interesting Wall Street Journal survey, I believe it was fairly recently, about bullying in the laboratory space. It's more common than you would expect. We see it actually in all, in a lot of frontline healthcare positions, but, making sure that you're taking steps to make it easy for employees to report issues of harassment or bullying in the workplace, and that they feel supported in that. And then, of course, reasonable goals and expectations for your staff, especially if you're in an environment where you do not have optimal staffing levels, ensuring that does not simply trickle down to your current staff to where they're feeling overworked, and to make sure that you're finding creative ways to keep goals reasonable is going to go a long way to making sure that your morale stays as high as possible. Couple other things I want to emphasize, and I don't know what the kind of constituency is listening to this call. I think it's going to get shared quite a bit and recording. The C-suite and administration is also responsible for playing a vital role in retention and morale. The joke is always, right, whenever we need people to work harder or feel better about the job, we throw a pizza party. I think most folks at this point know pizza parties are nice. I'm never going to turn one down, but that they're not necessarily going to drive morale in the long term. There's really 3 things that we see labs that don't struggle with retention do consistently, and that is really take seriously compensation. We say cash talks, right? Whether that is some sort of bonus tied to performance, whether it is call it generous raises when it's time to adjust for costs of living, or just making sure that when you're recruiting, you're bringing people in at a wage level that you can continuously, hopefully move up over time, and that makes people feel valued in the role you're bringing them into. I think that's the number one thing laboratories can do to make people feel appreciated. The second thing is time off and strong benefits. We always encourage folks to take a look at their benefits and time off policies, making sure they're competitive. And then fostering, as I just mentioned in the last slide, career development and culture. My biggest thing here, the biggest thing I see and try to talk to labs about hiring managers and decision makers is to avoid being penny wise and pound foolish when it comes to compensation. I'll often see it's a common thing for us to kind of get involved in negotiations between laboratory techs, bench staff managers, and hiring managers, and the kind of, I call it haggling between $1 or $2 in shift differential or in hourly wage. I understand laboratories are trying to control costs, and I understand today with reimbursement rates, margins are more important than ever. What you want to make sure that you're doing is not just laying down arbitrary markers, but really thinking about what you can afford to pay and how paying at or at that optimal level is going to allow you to retain that staff over time. And frankly, paying an extra $1,000, $2,000, even $5,000 a year may save you a lot in the long run because you're not going to have unfilled jobs or have to be constantly replacing staff who are going to go elsewhere for more competitive salaries.